in Chicago, we fly through Chicago, and it's supposed to be 70. No,
Oh,
no
okay.
So that's always a problem when you go through Chicago.
There you go. Wow. Well, I have 8 o'clock. So with that, I'm going to fire it up and say thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Brian Cathanis. I'm a former Manuscript Society trustee of the Manuscript Society and the managing partner at National Appraisal Consultants. Tonight, we have a great program for you presented by Dr. Stuart Embury, and we're going to tell you all about that. So hopefully you will see our screen. We're all set to go. We got a nice crowd with us tonight. If you have questions, we'll talk a little bit about how you can ask questions and get involved in the chat. But right now, let me just tell you a little bit about what's going on. So thanks for coming. The sponsor is the Manuscript Society. We're a not-for-profit organization coming up on 75 years as an organization designed to help people understand the importance of manuscripts, letters, and historical documents, helping people preserve them and research them and learn a little about them. We offer scholarship programs, educational webinars, and an annual conference where people get together and we visit sometimes all over the world. So why a webinar is probably the easiest way for us to reach so many people, where you can sit back, have a cup of coffee or another, something a little stronger in your hand while you can relax and enjoy some new information that you can hopefully apply or at least enjoy. Why now? Well, we do it every first Monday of the month. That's why we call it Manuscript Monday. And sometimes we'll do Manuscript Monday on a Tuesday if it's a holiday like Labor Day or Memorial Day. Who is invited? We've invited folks from the Manuscript Society, from a variety of different collectors society, the Society of American Archivists, the International Society of Appraisers, the American Society of Appraisers, the Appraiser Association of America, National Association of Jewelry Appraisers, other collector clubs and members, and anybody that you may have invited. It's open to just about anybody. What we're going to cover tonight, I'll tell you that in just a second. And I'm also going to tell you how you can get more information on the Manuscript Society and learn a little more about what's going on in the world of art and collectibles and manuscripts and historical documents. The program tonight is called the Tile Club. It was one of many societies that was formed across the United States during the late 19th century. Dr. Embury is going to talk about one in particular, but they were all over the place, and they had amazing artists, including Winslow Homer, Augustus St. Gaudens, other names you would certainly recognize. The club was founded in 1877, quite a while ago, and there was this big, strong wave of an interest in decorative arts. Members would get together once a week and they would paint tiles. Some of those tiles are extremely rare and can be very, very valuable. It was also time for artists to get together and share ideas and look for different things. They also went on trips, and I won't tell any more than that about it, because Dr. Embury will explain a whole lot more of that. Let me tell you about who our presenter is tonight. Dr. Embury, he's a retired family physician. He's in Nebraska, and he's been involved with medicine for more than 50 years. He became interested in art when he started back in 1970, and he began collecting all kinds of prints and American art books. He'll tell you more about that. That evolved into a 12,500 volume library with all aspects of American art, and I'm hoping he's going to show you a picture of that library as well. A few years later, he got interested in painting and watercolors and sculpture. He became friends with an Italian-American artist. He published 3 books about him. We got a real pro with us tonight, and we're really delighted that he's taken the time to help us out. He's also focused on letters and documents and manuscripts of American artists, in essence, his involvement with the Manuscript Society. He's been very involved and a great supporter of the organization. His collection stands at 1,500 pieces with a Gilbert Stuart letter, which is probably the rarest in his collection. And he's planning on donating that to the Archives of American Art. So with that, I am going to, here comes the big transition. We're going to turn the program over, which means I have to stop sharing my screen, and I have to ask Dr. Embury Stuart to share his screen. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to make you the host, Stuart.
My share screen went away.
All right, you should be able to find that little share screen at the bottom again. Did that show up?
It isn't there, huh?
Okay, let's see if we can slide over is your PowerPoint up at all, or did you minimize the PowerPoint?
It's all ready to go.
Okay, what you need to do is just minimize it for a second, and that other screen with the share screen might pop up.
Well, you're still on, unfortunately.
Okay.
Here, let's see.
There should be another picture. There should be another screen with you on it.
Now.
There you go. So click on that right there.
Okay.
And there's only one screen for you to share, I believe.
Right.
All right. And now
Okay.
I see you're sharing your screen and we see your PowerPoint presentation, but you haven't hit the start from the beginning thing yet. So once you
Okay.
do that, so you are all set. We see your first screen about the first Renoir screen. So I introduced you to, ladies and gentlemen, and people from all around the world, Dr. Stuart Embury. Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate you
Well,
being here.
thank you for a wonderful introduction. In 1970, I finished my internship and we moved to a small town in south central Nebraska, about 6,000 people, and took up my medical practice there. We had lots of bare walls in our house. We moved everything in a little U-Haul trailer. And so I bought this print from a catalog by the famous French Impressionist painter, Pierre-Auguste Renoir. And I didn't even know that Renoir was a printmaker. So these are some of the things you lose, you realize when you start collecting. And so I found this book. It took a little while to find it. And it also was written by a physician and the graphic work of Renoir. And it turned out that Renoir did 59 prints, original prints during his lifetime. And I started collecting them and I actually had 39 of them at one time. That book became the nidus for a library on American art. I started collecting. The next book was a book on Mary Cassatt, and then there it went. I had 4 rare book dealers feeding me. I had first choice on everything they had. So the library is just really a great library of very rare things. And it now resides at the University of Nebraska Lincoln in the archives room. In the late 1800s, there were many art clubs especially mostly in New York. And the National Academy of Design was the first one in 1825. And then you could see down at the Tile Club about 1877. And the Tile Club was considered really at the time the most prestigious and important art club in that period. People like Winslow Homer and others really made it at least the premier club. So one of the books in the Tile Club, in my library, was the book of the Tile Club. And I was in a book dealer, rare book dealer, and there was this box up on the very top shelf. And I said, "What's that?" He brings it down, and here's this marvelous book. He didn't even remember that he had it. And I want you to notice here that on the left there is bone. And the artists in the club had symbols or medals, and they did not use their name. They would call him Bone. Ooh. So this is the book. It's absolutely marvelous. It was published in 1886. And if I showed it to you, you would swear that it was just off the press. The covers are vellum. And it was produced in a limited edition of 100 copies. And this is in the original box, and there's probably not another copy of this book anywhere in the world with the original box. This is the frontispiece, and you notice this is copy number 3 I have. Cambridge has copy number 1, Harvard, and Museum of Fine Arts Boston has copy number 5. I've tracked those down. So how did the Tile Club get started? Well, Walter Paris and William Wimbridge started the first meeting at their studio, and then they were joined by Abbey and Reinhardt. And then the third meeting, the really important artists started, Winslow Homer, J. Alden Weir, William Merritt Chase. You probably recognize most of these names. I wasn't familiar with Laffin or O'Donovan, however. And they met every Wednesday at one of the artists' studios. So this was just a little brief. They wanted to know what they were going to do. They knew they were going to get together, but they were maybe going to paint on wallpaper, or maybe they were going to paint on fabric. But one of them came up with this idea that they would punish the crockery of Iberian potters. So they were painting on Spanish tiles, about between 8 and 9 inches square. And they were very concerned that the club be kept small. It was never more than 25 to 30 members. And so they were very reticent of they would be overrun. They said that people would come and pull at the latchstring with tears in their eyes and piously beg for admission. And I think really, if the truth be known, I would probably do the same thing. This was a club I'd love to have been in. During that time, there was an aesthetic movement, and they called it decorative mania. And I've included some of the text in this because it's really funny and well written, and it's just humorous. They said that the American homes were being turned into curiosity shops. And mostly it was women who were doing this painting. They would get together and paint. And so they said the purest maidens in the land smelled of turpentine. And their paint rags were their frilly underwear. So otherwise, the club really had no regulations. They had no parliamentary usages, and no member was ever known to be out of order. It was very loosely put together. The habitat, they finally got a clubhouse, and they wanted it to be an undiscoverable place. Only they would know about it. And they even offered a challenge for find it if you can. And they said that, quote, open the door, which if it will open, clangs a warning bell. And now you're in a dark tunnel. And here's the entrance to the club. It's from a sketch by Hopkins Smith. And you can see it's 58.5 West 10th Street, and it's down under the stoop. On that street was the 10th Street Studio, which you probably mostly have heard of. And it was a very famous art studio during that time. My artist friend, Luigi Lucioni, lived at 33 West 10th Street, so he lived very nearby. And this is a sketch of them tiling. They had this long table in the room, and they would gather and work on the tiles. And we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And this is another photo of the drawing of the Tile Club meeting. And this was in Harper's Weekly. So I'm going to go through kind of quickly the founders of the club and some of the members. Walter Paris was the first one, and his symbol was gall. And second one was Winbridge, and his symbol was grasshopper. And he's the one that came up with the original idea of painting on tiles. So the next few slides, I won't do a lot of talking. I'll just go through them rather quickly. There's usually a picture of the artist, a picture of his symbol, and then one of the paintings that he did in his lifetime. So to give you an idea of the style, there was many styles of art in this club. This is by Stanley Reinhardt, and I love this painting. It's called The Lonely Vigil, and it's women on the Atlantic coast looking out to sea, hoping that their husbands will be coming home soon. He was called Sirius, and that's his medal. R. Swan Gifford was an American landscape painter. He was a Hudson River School painter, and they called him the Griffin. Winslow Homer was the third member of the third meeting, and they called him the Obtuse Bard. And you're probably all very familiar with Winslow Homer. This is his famous painting, Breezing Up, which is at the National Gallery. Every time I go to Washington, I make a beeline over to see that painting. Laughlin was called Polyphemus. My pronunciation might not be right, but Polyphemus was a cyclops, and Laughlin himself had only one eye. O'Donovan was a self-taught American sculptor, and one of the things that he did was a bust of Winslow Homer. You can see that here. Earl Shin was one of the third members of the Tile Club, and they called him Bone, I think take off on Shin Bone. And he became an art critic, and he had a pseudonym, Edward Strahan. And he wrote to his sister in 1867, about 10 years before. He said, art is not my thing. I'm nearsighted, I'm colorblind, my vision is failing, and that's not intended for me. So he turned to writing and criticism, And Shin and Laffin both were critics, and art critic was the worst word in the club's vocabulary. And that's Shin Bone. I really like this painting, this gentleman's paintings. I almost bought a couple over the years, but didn't. He was called the Owl, Francis Hopkins Smith, and he actually was an engineer too, and he built the foundation for the Statue of Liberty. And I love the painting. It's watercolor and gouache of The Hague. J. Alden Weir, I much admire too. They called him Cadmium because he loved painting with yellow cadmium. And many of his paintings have that in that. Courtly was we called him Marine. He was born in Paris, and he moved to Baltimore, and he did a lot around the Chesapeake Bay. Frost, A.B. Frost, was called Icicle, and he did a lot of hunting scenes. Stanford White was an engineer and architect, and he actually designed the Book of the Tile Club. He also designed many mansions at Newport. And he was killed, murdered actually, by the husband of his lover. August St. Gaudens, you all know St. Gaudens, I'm sure. He was called the Saint, and he was an Irish-born American sculptor, and he designed the $20 double eagle gold piece. And Robert Louis Stevenson said, St. Gaudens looked very much like the saint, or even the godlike sculpture. Twachtman was an impressionist painter, and they called him Pi, and he is famous for doing many winter scenes in landscape. William Merrick Chase, another of my favorites, was Briesse, and this is a lovely painting that's also in the National Gallery, I believe. Mountain was called the Puritan, and he was actually an honorary member, and this is a church scene in the colonial England. He died of 1905 of heart disease, and I thought his obituary was wonderful. He said, quote, he was kindly, genial, humorous, lover of a good story, the essence of hospitality, and wholly free from jealousy, malice, and uncharitable judgments. Everybody should have an obituary like that. Dealman was called Terrapin, turtle soup. And Parsons, I don't know who he is. He was called Burr or Englishman. He was an honorary member. He was an English artist and engraver. Francis Davis Millais was called Bulgarian. And he actually died on the Titanic when it went down. And I love his painting. It's very beautiful. Sarony was called the Hawk. He was a lithographer and a photographer, and he worked a lot with Currier and Ives. And he photographed many famous people of the day, including Mark Twain and Oscar Wilde. Vedder was a little bit of a strange guy. He was a symbolist painter, and he also was a bit of an occultist. And on the right there is the cover of Scribner magazine. Bunce was a bishop, and he was a landscape and marine painter. Peyton was actually a writer and not a painter, and he was called Haggis. Maynard, these are some of the lesser people in the club, Bird of Freedom, and I do love this painting of a colonial soldier. Drake was in the club, and Varnish, Sugio. And as I mentioned, they really, I don't think painting was kind of a sidelight, really. They really enjoyed music and food and smoking and alcohol and great conversation. And so they had a baritone, which was a singer, a horsehair played the cello, piano was played by Husk, and catgut played the violin. Trousseau was an honorary member, and Bush, I got something covering my screen here. Bush was an illustrator and a political cartoonist. So how did they approach their club? Well, they didn't take the tile work very seriously. And they improvised a lot. There was no rules on what you could do. And some of the men they would sketch on the tile and then paint it in. Others would just put some paint on the tile and try to make it into a picture. And some of the tiles were very, very good, and some were not so good, got thrown away. So here's just some examples I could find of some of the tiles. So at one of their meetings, this is a typical meeting, I picture it in New York on 10th Street, and the snow had just fallen, maybe an inch or 2 inches of snow. And here, all of a sudden, 12 to 15 men show up, and they come into this very close, warm room, and they stomp their feet and take off their caps, their fur caps or whatever, and their coats. And there was this wonderful smell coming up from the basement kitchen. And Daniel is preparing mallard ducks. And there's a big chafing dish on the table full of oysters. And he's making a Welsh rarebit for later. And I had to look up what Welsh rarebit is because I don't think I ever had it. It's a kind of toast with a cheese sauce on it. And then another member comes in then later, Chestnut, and he had been over in England, and he had just come back, and so he's coming. And he was one of the favorites of the club. And the owl, Hopkins Smith, said, attention, attention, give your facilities to the tenderloin, pay attention to the tenderloin. And one of the members was a little bit not quite, he didn't think it was quite done yet. And he said there's a, quote, streak of Reuben's flesh all along the middle. And I thought that was so interesting that he would use a painting and a pigment to describe a rare steak. And the owl thought that was pretty blasphemous. So he said the steak is a culmination on something hiding that and cannot appreciate it, should take a rope and go and be an art critic. So then slowly from the basement, coming up the stairs was this African-American gentleman, their cook. His name was Daniel. And I thought this was quite interesting. He said he's balancing 3 fingers a long dish on which in regimental order lay a flock of mallard ducks, a little flock of mallard ducks. You can just picture them around this plate, ready to crumble and melt to the tooth with tenderness. And so towards midnight, he came back up out of the cellar again, and he had the Welsh rarebit ready, but they were so full that they really didn't eat very much of it. And the Eagle said 12 tilers, so there must have been 12 members that night, said, reaching for his coat, he says, I have a model coming at 9, so I have to leave. And Cadmian said, yeah, I have one too coming. So you can just picture these guys full of food and very sedate from all of the things that they had done at the meeting. They stomped out into the night. So this is just a little article that appeared in the Scribner magazine, and we've gone over this a little bit before. I'll just go through it rather quickly. They decided to do tiles, and they had a tendency to go into music. And we talked about husk and horsehair and catgut. And this is the decorative age, of course, that we talked about. And so, if I'm going backwards, okay. The members of the club were very loyal, and few of them ever missed a meeting, except if they were gone. So at the first annual dinner, 1878, Obtuse Bard was Homer, of course, said, let's do a journey in search of the picturesque. and all kinds of ideas, Adirondacks, the coast of Maine, the Catskills, and somebody suggested Long Island. And so nobody went to Long Island in those days, so they decided to go to Long Island. And during the 10 years of the existence of the club, they did 4 exhibitions. One was to Long Island, one was to the Northern Canal, and one was to the Two Sisters Shipwreck, and another back to Long Island. So this is Scribner's did an article on the first trip, and this is to Long Island. And so they were going to go on by the boat to Jesse Conklin's castle, which was an inn on the island. And so they all said all aboard, and they got on this boat and went out to the island. And Jesse met them and took them up to the inn. And he said, any gentleman like an oyster to give them an appetite? And he had 2 little boys there shucking fresh oysters. And then after they had that, they said, follow solid men to the front. And he led his way into the dining room where they had this feast. And it was a very lovely evening for being inside. They had this nice roaring fire. The rain was pelting against the windows, and there was some wind, which kind of added something to the mood. And one of the men, Abby, gave an address. They did a recitation, and they had a violin solo. So the next morning, they got up, and Griffin was out looking for a sketch. And he found, within a minute, found some wonderful location for sketching. And the Marine found this old boat and he was drawing. And so they were all spread out all around this inn with their table set up sketching. And this is one of the sketches by Gifford. So that afternoon they left and they went up, had walking around Lake Ronkonkoma. And the owl, Hopkins Smith, spied this pile of enormous hats, straw hats. And so they all went in and bought these hats. And then they went on to another inn. And the next day they went by railroad to Bridgehampton. And the owl again found a millinery shop, and this lady had these wonderful crimson ribbons. And so each one of them had 2 or 3 of them put on their hat. So you can imagine 12 to 15 gentlemen, probably portly, going down the road in a group. And they then went over to East Hampton, and that was a really small town, 1 block long. And there was just a tremendous number of sketching opportunities there. And here's a picture of the milliner getting the ribbons. So the next day they went over to Shelter Island. This is Abby that shows the group out sketching. And they went back home. The next trip was they decided they were going to take a barge trip. And the owl, again, you can see how influential he was. I know what to do next summer. We'll hire a canal barge and go up the Erie Canal. So 2 of them were designated to find a barge, and they couldn't really find one because most of the barges were old. They had been carrying coal or fertilizer. They smelled of mules or horses, and they had to be fully loaded to go into the bridges. So they finally found a new boat. And the captain was a little dubious about taking this group of vagabonds any place, but he decided to do it. So they started loading this boat up with everything they could possibly imagine to make it even like home. Vases, easels, draperies, sofas, beds, everything they could. And Daniel, the black cook, brought down 5 tons of ice, a huge refrigerator, a cooking range, 200 pounds of beef and mutton, vegetables, and I love this sentence, 2 coops full of Thai chickens. I'm not sure what Thai chickens are, but it's wonderful. So they were going to, they call it the float. And so what it is, it's several barges lashed together, and then a tugboat will pull them up to the river. And pretty soon another African-American came up out of the stairs, and they named him Deuteronomy. He was kind of the butler there, and they hired another young man and they called him Priam. So they had a committee on decorations, and so they transferred this barge into a home and a place of beauty. And they even had a piano and a violin, and a big dining room table, just everything they would need for a week or two on the water. So the day of departure came, and the tugboat came along and took the float up the river. And Daniel gave them a wonderful meal of omelets, and they kind of were really enjoying the time. Of course, artists getting together, they talk about trends in art and everything. And they talked a lot about satirically about the Hudson River School. And they were from the National Academy from 1825, as we said. And so they said they were good, old, mossy geographical landscapes. And they were the new men, the radicals, members of the Society of American Artists. So at Albany, they got out of the tow and they hooked up horses or mules, and they went up the canal very slowly, being pulled by these animals. And one of the girls, a young girl on the shore, asked if she could play, and so she came in and gave them a little recital. So it was really neat walking, pulling this boat loaded with everything they needed along the canal, and a very leisurely pace. And just, I think it would be extremely relaxing. We talked about the Hudson River School, and this is Thomas Cole, who was considered the father of the Hudson River School. And he had his studio in northern New York, and it's a museum now. I haven't actually been there yet, but I would love to hit there. So at a little far up the canal, they tied up under some willow trees, and they put the Japanese lanterns out, and they painted everything around, all the people around there, and it was just like they were at home. And you can imagine this beautifully decorated barge coming down the canal. I'm sure within any place within 100 miles, they probably knew that they were coming. So all these people would come, and they would bring them fruit and flowers, and they'd come on board and watch and see what they were doing. So here's just some of the drawings that are in the book. This is one of the lock keeper's daughters. And so they would do sketches everywhere. So they started back down the Hudson, and Daniel remembered his meal. He called it the Last Supper, the last day on the water. And he thought it was a masterpiece of his existence. And he said how those gentlemen pitched into that chicken broil that night. It appeared like they never were going to get enough, nor the waffles either. And the barge came to an end, the voyage, and they went their separate ways. This is the last one I'm going to tell about. This is the tow again. This was the trip to the Two Sisters. And this was a schooner which had been shipwrecked and was high and dry on the beach. And they decided they were going to go there. So they got a tugboat to take them out there. And again, Daniel brought all the food and stuff. And the owl, Hopkins Smith, said, "We're all here, let's go." So when they got to the boat, it was kind of getting dark. So Daniel made this huge pot of soup on the table. There was steaks and potatoes and onions, and they all got kind of fatigued, and they headed for their beds. The next morning, Brius came back. He'd been out looking for a place to sketch, and he just came up empty. He couldn't find anything to sketch, and everyone else went out and they couldn't find anything either. So there wasn't much around this area. And this gentle breeze kind of came in, and they were at first kind of felt okay. And then all of a sudden, this huge mass of mosquitoes came in, and they said, "We got to get out of here." And so they went out, and down the road was a small town, and with an innkeeper, and then he put them up with no warning. And this town was really had a lot of great sketching things. This was a kind of a shipbuilding town, and there was all kinds of things. It rained one day, and one of the people gave them their sail loft to work in. Let's see. Okay. At the end, there was a piano and an organ, so they had lots of music there. And they reported that no finer music had ever been played in that town. William Sidney Mount, who was a Hudson River School painter, lived in that area. And about 10 years prior, he had died. And so they went over there one evening and they were met very well by the family and shown his works and things. And so these days were happy. They had clam bakes on the beach. They had long swims in the water. They went up into the hills and harbors, and their sketchbooks were just filled to overflowing. And soon it was time to leave, and they took their leave. This is just a little quote I put in. Over the years, then they looked back very favorably with their memories. And he said, Griffin, the long float in the upholstered canal barge, so often imitated, but never matched. So you remember that. And so here's just some illustration. There's wonderful illustration in the book, and they're very well done. And in the spring of 1886, Earl Shinn, or the Cyclops, Polyphemus, said, maybe we should make a book. And they wanted to kind of do it to tease everybody, because they had this wonderful club. And so they were letting them visit them in a book. So the Town Club book was started. And Stanford White, as I mentioned, designed the book. George W. Maynard designed the seals. And Shinn and Smith were responsible for the text. A.B. Frost sprinkled vignettes throughout the book. The subject and styles of these drawings proves that the Tau Club did not represent a particular style of painting. They all had all kinds of painting styles, and some of them were writers, some of them were critics. So it was a very diversified group of men. And it showed that it was excellent proof of the elegant nature of the club. These men were cosmopolitan, they were intelligent, they were very well versed in what was going on. But in 1887, the club lost its clubhouse, the members drift away, and the Tau Club ceased to exist. But the Tau Club provided an important social forum for its members. It probably was more of a social club, really, than an art club. And Earl Shinn, spoke of the special nature of the club. And I just love this paragraph. It's so full of just great. The ideas, their talk and conversation discussed here, were produced unaffectedly from the Vatican, the Thieves' Quarter in London, the streets of Naples, Vienna, and Algiers were about equally present in their minds. These were men who were worldly and traveled extensively. And they assembled around their friendly table in coats from Oxford, from Madrid, in shoes half worn from the size of Vesuvius and the galleries of Gibraltar. All these comrades challenging each other by names that were meaningless to the cold world, that was using their symbols. So through their mutual experience, perseverance, and most important, their art, they managed in one decade to establish a new and a more cosmopolitan identity for American art, as well as a greater appreciation and respect for a new breed of American artists. Excuse me. So this is one of my favorite quotes. It's by Goethe. And I had a good friend who's now passed away, was a world-class calligrapher in Kearney, Nebraska. And so he did this for me. And it says, one ought every day at least to hear a little song, read a good poem, see a fine picture, and if it were possible to repeat a few reasonable words. So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share one of my passions. And I hope that any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. What do I do
Let's
next?
try that again. I'm going to take over the screen like the Outer Limits, the old Outer Limits TV show. So with your permission, where am I right here? I'm going to,
Should I click stop share?
you can do that. Yep. And I'm going to take over. Where are we? I'm going to take over the host.
There you go.
Reclaim the host position. And then I'm going to share my screen now and get you back up here again. Oh, that's not exactly what I want to do. That's us at the Jersey Shore for what it's worth. And there we go. So what we're going to do now, I appreciate I got some questions that came up already, which is great. Joanne asked a couple of questions. I saw some hands up. There's a Q&A spot there too at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in your questions there. I'll read them to Stuart and he will certainly answer them. But first, let me give you just a couple of quick things and then we'll get to questions for sure. All right. Let's go back a little bit. There we go. So just so you know, let me get this out of the way here a little bit. There we go. Come on, there you go. We're going to keep, this is going to be, it's being recorded tonight. So we're going to put this webinar up on the Manuscript Society website. Give me about a week. I got to edit some of the opening and the closing and all that kind of stuff, and we'll post it. I want to thank people who came and joined us tonight, especially the trustees and the staff of the Manuscript Society, and certainly to you for being part of the program, which is great. Every Monday, first Monday of the month, Manuscript Monday, we got a program. If you have something you'd like to see, let me know. If you have something that you'd like to present, please let me know. That'd be great. Want to be an underwriter? We're going to start underwriting the program. If you like the program, if you want to support it, we'll throw a couple slides up there thanking you as an underwriter. I can give you more information on that. Let me know if you'd like to be an underwriter and support this program as we move forward. What's up next? December 5th, Alfred Lemon's going to talk about Spanish Louisiana, what's going on down in New Orleans and all those kind of things, and plenty more programs coming up in 2023. If you're not a Manuscript Society member, you can go to manuscript.org and you can find out how to be a member. There's a lot of great information on that website, all kinds of interesting things. And if you need more information, you can email me at brian@cathanis.com. That's brian@cathanis.com. If you're listening and not watching, it's brian@KATHENES. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. And now we go on to questions. Joan says, is there a collection of tiles that still exists as a group, or are there current collector clubs, Stuart?
I don't know of any clubs, but there is a wonderful, it's on the web, and one of the museums back east published a tile club exhibit. They had an exhibition of the tile club, and it's a wonderful thing. And they published a catalog, but I searched for 2 weeks for the catalog and finally called the museum, and they said that, well, that was never printed, but it is online and it is readable. You can page through it. So
terrific.
It shows all kinds of, I can't tell you the museum, but if you just Google the tile club, you'll find it. And if you can't find it, I have it someplace. You could email me and I'll be happy to find it.
Got it. Where did these end up? Some of them, when they look like they were a series of tiles, were they fireplace surrounds? Where did they go, and how do have collectors found them, and what's going on with them now? Where are they hiding?
Homer, Obtuse Bard, did a fireplace with them, and that's online also. You can see it. And somebody made a door out of it with inserts. I think there are probably about 8 tiles in that door.
Oh, no kidding.
It's in that book I was telling you about. So yes, they destroyed a lot of them because they weren't really, it was fun. It wasn't just trying to, get something to sell or
sure
to keep really. So whoever hosted the meeting that night, they got to keep the tiles.
Understood. That's great. Craig Sperling asked, was there a lot of interest of those etchings along with their trips? And were they done on tile or parchment? How were the etchings done? Were they paper or parchment?
The etchings were published in various magazines during that time. The Harper's Weekly, Scribner, and it's very interesting because most of that stuff is online. It's unbelievable.
Hmm.
what's online, you can get, but those were etchings that were in the book, and they were probably done for the book, and not probably
Understood.
not a lot of them available.
Right. Understood. I got it. Yeah. Typically things that were done for illustrations weren't made to be kept or done on a
Right.
medium that might last for a long time too. So tell us about your collection, some of the art that's in your collection.
Well, I started when I started my practice, and you can imagine a rural family practice is quite busy. And so I really needed something to keep my sanity, really. So I started pretty heavy in art and books, and that's the
Mhm.
first thing, or prints and books. And books went on for 50 years, but I kind of gravitated to paintings. I have some wonderful paintings. I have a wonderful impressionist painting by John Coke. Um, I have a wonderful watercolor by, he's a contemporary, but it's Stephen Scott Young. Um, and well, we have no wall space. And I wanted to buy I saw a painting the other day online, and I wanted to buy it, but my wife forbid it. She said, well, if you want to buy that, you have to give up something. So,
You just have to buy a house with more walls. That's all. Or more
yeah.
side
Well,
walls. There
you
you
can
go.
imagine you can imagine 12,500 books in my house.
Oh my gosh, that's great. You have to boost up the foundation and extra
Yeah.
beams and this and that for sure. When we put our library in, the builder said, we're going to put an extra beam in here because we know this shelf is going to be all books, so I'm
Yeah.
sure you had the same challenge. Hey, Brian Richter asked, did the Tile Club receive any recognition in Europe during its existence?
Not that I'm aware of,
Mhm.
but these guys were really cosmopolitan people, so they traveled all over the world. You can read the history of Smith, and of course, Homer went to the Caribbean. He did a lot of Caribbean pictures.
Mhm.
So I'm sure there was discussed. Yes, probably not the tiles, though. That was more a fun thing. That wasn't.
Yeah, and that's what an interesting way to do that. Can you think of organizations now or groups of people now that are doing this kind of thing? Are there any groups or artists or clubs that are kind of have this kind of, I guess, wild and crazy, we don't care about anybody else, we're not going to hurt anybody, we're going to go have fun on our own kind of a thing?
Well,
Anything?
none of them I'm aware of. I think most of the clubs today are sort of I'll probably get in trouble for probably pretty stuffy. I was collecting prints by Isabel Bishop,
Okay.
and she had a studio in Union Square. She's quite famous painter and printmaker. And so I had about 3 or 4 of her prints. And so I wrote to her one time in the essay, would it be possible to meet you? And so she said, yes, come by, definitely. And a friend of mine, and we went over there, and she took us to the National Arts Club in New York, which was a fabulous experience. So she was 90 years old, weighed about the same weight, and we thought, and it was windy as heck. I thought we were going to lose her for a little while. That was a delightful. There's been so many times that, like collecting books. I've been in probably every rare bookstore around the country and around the world, and my kids always kind of laugh. We laugh when we get together because remember when you took me to Ars Libra or Wyeth in New York?
Oh, okay. Wow.
Oh, yeah, they were marvelous. But
Yeah.
those are all gone. The internet's ruined all that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. There was nothing like wandering into a bookstore and looking for something, or finding a dealer that knew what you liked and would be able to find just the thing that you were that would fit for you too.
Well,
There are still. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I always looked on the top shelf and on the floor. That's where you found the good stuff. In the box on the floor, there was 15 pieces in there. One of them was worthwhile.
Yeah, there you go.
That's where you found the good stuff.
Understood. And part of the hunt was all it. The hunt was all part of it too, wasn't it?
Oh, it was wonderful. I found a book on Homer. No, on oh, mine skips me.
It's all right.
Whistler.
Yeah,
A signed book by Whistler on the top
no
shelf.
kidding. Wow.
Rare bookstore in a small town. So
They're
yeah,
still out,
the hunt
still
was
out
great.
there. Yep. Yeah, there was something about a road trip that just isn't
Yeah.
doesn't seem to happen much anymore. Still does. There's still some great dealers out there that can find things for you, but it is different with the internet now for sure. Good deal. But the internet didn't, with the internet now we have an opportunity to share your passion and all the exciting stuff that you do with so many people out there that we normally would have not had that opportunity.
Well, in a way, the internet would be good if I had it when we started out, because everything is 5 times less expensive than it was. $100 book, they thought there was 3 copies in existence, and it turned out to be 500.
Yeah, that's very true. Good deal. We got time for a few more questions. If you have questions, type them up there. Marion, you had your hand up, but I don't know whether that was up for a question or it was just something you had up before. So I'm going to take a quick look. I think Scott raised his hand. Do I have a hand up? I'm looking. Here we go. Let's go back to my participants here. And I got a hand up. That would be Scott. I'm going to unmute you so you can go direct here too. All right. Where did he go? There we go. All right. You got to unmute yourself, Scott, and you got the floor. If you can.
Looks like he's still muted.
He's trying. I got asked to unmute more. Disable lower hand, promote the panelist. Maybe we'll make you a panelist. That might help. So now you're official. So I don't know if you got your mic on or not, Scott. And if not, you can just type in the Q&A, and I'm sorry.
I gotta thank Scott. I hadn't seen him for many, many years. When I was collecting Haitian material, he found me a wonderful, marvelous letter from Haiti.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, and the handwriting was just gorgeous. So thank you, Scott.
That's good. Well, if you can figure out how to unmute yourself, you're all set. And if not, just type something in the question there, and you'll be all set. So I apologize. We can't seem to get Scott. Well, I'll find out, because we're on an astronomy, a Manuscript Society astronomy club with Doug Rorman, who is putting up pictures and letting us know how insignificant small we are every week when he's got a new picture. So I'm sorry, Scott, I see your hand up. I just can't seem to get to you. I'm going to lower everybody's hand, and I just can't get you to, I've asked you to unmute, but I guess you can't. So with that, we are kind of at the end. Closing thoughts, Stuart.
I think that our life in my whole family's life in art, painting, manuscripts. I'm kind of turned to manuscripts now, but it's just added such a wonderful dimension to our existence. Really, we've had wonderful. I mean, I love going into old bookstores, and I was one in England I went to, and the guy was an expert on Rembrandt. He spent 2 hours with me, just this little dusty shop, just telling me all about Rembrandt, bringing stuff out. One time I was in the Art Institute of Chicago in the rare print room, and the keeper of the prints, we were the only people there. He spent an hour and a half with me bringing out Renoir. And so just, I mean, I have 50 years of wonderful experiences. I wish there was, I don't think any painting I bought, I wouldn't have bought. And I'm kicked myself 10 times over for things I passed on. I wish I'd have bought them.
There you go. Marion says she put her hand up by mistake, so no question. But Bob Hopper asked, did they ever include their spouses or their models? Maybe those models should be in quotes to any of the events. Do you know of, were they invited along?
There's no mention in the book that I'm aware of. Yeah.
I got it. I just wonder.
This was a guy's thing.
That was a guy's thing. That's too cool. Good deal. That's great. And I got to tell you that you and I sat across the table from each other during our Manuscript Society dinner, one of the dinners down in Williamsburg, and we just really got to chat. And I heard some just great stories. And I got to tell you, that's one of the things I really love about the Manuscript Society is not only our board meetings. We were all on the board, but when we get together for our annual conferences, you really get to know the people that are your fellow members and share your interests. And that's kind of how we got to talking about having you do this. So if you're not a Manuscript Society member, you might want to think about it. Go check out that website. I got it up there now. And if you got questions for me, just drop me an email at brian@cathonis.com. Go ahead.
I would say that the annual Manuscript meeting is, number one, the best bargain in the world. We went to Paris and several other countries, and even though the US ones are just marvelous, you get to see they're a bargain, and I would just encourage anybody to join and attend a meeting.
Yeah, if there's one thing that we get to do is, where it says do not enter, we get to enter. Someone takes us behind the scenes, kind of backstage, lets us see what's going on with restoration, what's entering that museum or that library. We get to touch some things where it says do not touch, and it's just really a fun place to be for sure. Good deal. Let's see what I got here. Good. Good. So with that, I want to thank you for being part of this. Thank you, Stuart. It has been a delight. You are just an incredible wealth of knowledge. I am so happy that you decided to share that with us. And we will see you next first Monday with Alfred Lemon talking about Spanish Louisiana. Thanks so much for joining us. We will catch you next time right here on Manuscript Monday.